But we're going to turn right now to Oxford in Britain. Tariq Ramadan is professor of contemporary Islamic studies at Oxford University, author of a number of influential books on Islam in the West, including Western Muslims and the Future of Islam, and In the Footsteps of the Prophet, Lessons from the Life of Muhammad. Ramadan was named by Time magazine as one of the most important innovators of the 21st century. Under the Bush administration, he was not allowed to come into the United States, where he was invited to teach at Notre Dame University. Tariq Ramadan now teaches at Oxford. Professor Ramadan, your response to the Chilcot report, the attacks in Iraq, and then we'll move to Saudi Arabia and the ISIS attacks this weekend there.
Look, I think that what we heard from Tariq Ali and Sami Ramadani, these are important points. That it's very true that what happened there and what is happening now is connected to policies that were decided in Washington and decided in London, which had nothing to do with human rights, had nothing to do with freedom and democracy. It was all about interest and geostrategic interest. And if we go for it, we understand that the war was launched for very, in fact, geostrategic and economic interest and had nothing to do with the dignity. So now we know that, and things are happening now that are showing how much or how many contradictions we had in the British policies following in the footsteps of the American policy in the region. And then the connection that we have here with Saudi Arabia as an ally in the region, and the mess that we have now in the new Middle East is all has to do with some of the reasons that they were talking about right now, and we cannot disconnect this from that. If we do this, we are completely misled, and we can end up with what is happening in Saudi Arabia with the attacks during the last days by supporting the regime and not understanding that it's much more complex than that.
Well, Tariq Ramadan, what about those attacks? Because here you're seeing a situation of actually, especially in the attack in Medina, near the a holy site of Saudi Arabia and of Islam, the attacks on Muslims themselves.
Yes, but this is not new. You are talking about Iraq, and this is every day we have exactly the same people targeting Muslims. Shia or Sunni armed Muslims is the same in Syria. It's the same in the whole region. It's even the same with Saudi Arabia attacking Yemen. So we have, you know, the majority of the victims are Muslims. And here what we have in Saudi Arabia, which is new, is targeting Al-Madinah, which is the second sacred place for Muslims. So it's as if they are now ready to go against all the Muslims, and you can hear from around the world people saying this has nothing to do with Islam, it's against any Islamic teachings. At the same time, if you look at the symbols, they were targeting Shia mosques, they were targeting the US embassy, so they are targeting symbols. So we have to ask ourselves what they are trying to do here. Is it because they are losing ground in Iraq that they are doing this? Is it in fact just to show that they can target the people wherever they are? But the point for us here is that there is no clear vision in what they are doing except to spread around violence and violent extremism. So we have to condemn this, but we have to take a step back and to try to understand what is happening in the region and who are the people who are playing. And you know, Tariq Ali was saying they are making mistakes. Unfortunately, I'm more cynical than that. I'm not sure that they are mistakes. I think that they are policies that are helping the United States and European countries in the mess to sell weapons and still to control the region out of this completely destabilized situation.
The King of Saudi Arabia has promised to strike with an iron hand against those responsible for a suicide attack near the Prophet's Mosque in Medina on Monday. Militants carried out 3 separate suicide bomb attacks across Saudi Arabia on the same day, including an attack in the holy city of Medina that killed 4 security officers near the mosque where the Prophet Muhammad is believed to be buried. The mosque is one of the holiest sites for Muslims worldwide. An earlier attack was carried out near the U.S. consulate in the Saudi Saudi city of Jeddah. 2 security officers were wounded. Another bombing took place near dusk outside a Shia mosque in the mainly Shia eastern city of Qatif. No group has claimed responsibility for Monday's attacks, but the so-called Islamic State has carried out similar bombings targeting Shia Muslims and Saudi security forces. The Sunni Muslim militant group has called for the overthrow of the Saudi monarchy.
And now the Saudi Interior Ministry spokesman has identified the assailant in the Jeddah attack as a 35-year-old Pakistani expatriate called Abdullah Khalzar Khan. According to the ministry, Khan worked as a private driver in the city for 12 years. The attacks were carried out as people were preparing for the Eid al-Fitr celebrations to mark the end of the holy month of Ramadan. Tariq Ramadan, as you talk about what happened in Saudi Arabia, can you talk specifically to an audience who is not so familiar with the religious significance of all of these places about not only the attacks but the Saudi government's response?
Look, first, from an Islamic perspective, it's something which is completely against the Islamic principles, and especially to target the holy city of Medina, the messenger city. It's known as Al-Madina al-Munawwara, which is the illuminated and illuminating city for the Muslims. So first, this is against the basic principles. The second thing, which is also very important from what is happening, is that now we have the Saudi regime saying we are going to be very tough on these. The problem that we have, which is internal to the Islamic reference and the Islamic trends, is that the type of Islamic interpretations that we have in Saudi Arabia, called Wahhabism or Salafi, as they call themselves, is very literalist. So, in fact, they are creating a mindset which is very dogmatic. It's us versus them, that is instrumentalized by more violent extremist groups going as far as being violent. So there is a gray area between the two interpretations or ideologies. Now what we are going to see is the Saudi regime being very tough with, in the name of suspicions towards anyone who is going to speak out. But we also have to say that this is not new. This regime is very tough with any type of opposition. Remember, during the time of the Arab uprisings, we had a mufti saying to the Muslims, it's against Islam to take into the street against the regime, while what we also have to say as Muslims, and this is why it's a shared responsibility, all what was said by Tariq Ali and Sami Ramadani about the Western policies and the visions and the contradictions with our own values in the West, this is right. But at the same time, it's very important for Muslims and for the Muslim voices to be vocal about the contradictions that we have with the Saudi regime. It's not because I'm condemning what is happening and the terrorist attacks now and the violent extremists that we have to condemn and we have to be vocal, that we should end up supporting a regime where there is no freedom of expression. There is a very narrow type of interpreting the scriptural sources. There is a very tough regime, no freedom, no women's rights. And I think that on this, we should not be on the side of the victims and taking the Saudi regime as the victim of what is happening. They are, in fact, instrumental in all what is happening in the region. And there is one thing that we cannot deny, that it's part of the message sent by the violent extremists, is that Saudi Arabia is in fact connected to great powers and playing a role in security, in monitoring, in the lack of freedom, in torturing the people, which is a very dirty role, and we have to say it, and we have to be clear on this as Muslims, as people who are now promoting and who want democracy for the Muslim majority countries and a more consistent policy in the region.
And Tariq Ali, what about this particular and complex role of Saudi Arabia in the Middle East and in the various conflicts in the region?
Well, Tariq Ramadan is perfectly right on this. I agree with him. This is nothing new, by the way. It started during the Cold War, when the United States used the Saudis to help get Wahhabi scholars, extremely rigid in their philosophical view of Islam, like the equivalent of some born-again Christian sects in the United States. And they were sent all over. They were sent to Indonesia, they were sent to Pakistan. Of course, they existed in the Arab world to a certain extent, and the aim was to fight communism. And they did it, and they helped, and they have grown stronger and stronger. And the main jihadi organizations, so-called, are very influenced by Wahhabism and believe in it, and they are ultra-sectarian, not just to other Sunnis, which we know, as they kill them endlessly, but they regard the Shia as heretics, not part of Islam, which is why they attack Shia mosques, why they kill Shia people, why they target Shia clerics, etc., etc. So this disunity is linked very strongly, I think, to the role which the West has played in the region, and which they recently, only most recently in Iraq, armed some of the Shia clerics to attack the Sunnis. They engaged in ethnic cleansings in the middle of Baghdad. They've created absolute havoc. The Sunni-Shia divide, which existed but on a very mild level. There were intermarriages even. The political parties had mixed central committees of Shias, Sunnis, Christians, others. That has also been wrecked by the American occupation of Iraq. And it's what we are witnessing is the Balkanization of the Middle East, which is why these monstrous groups spring up. They spring up, these monster groups, and no one can do anything about them because they've partially created them.
Tariq Ramadan, what do you think the response should be?
I think first that what we heard from Tariq Ali, it's very important, and once again, nothing new. In fact, if you look at the American policy in Latin America, it's selling weapons on both sides and letting people go for fighting, making money out of it and getting the advantage through the security. So I think that here, what is important for us first is to disconnect in a way this violent extremism from, the qualification of being Islamic. And this is why I'm not saying that it has nothing to do with Islam. I disagree with the people who are saying, no, it has nothing to do with Islam. We are dealing with people who come, who are quoting the Quran. We now, around the world, the Muslims should be clearer, not only on the violent extremists, but you can't just be against the violent extremists on the religious side and not understand that it has to do with a political stance that we need to have. And the political stance is first against all the dictatorships in the region, to be clear on all the Gulf states that they are now playing a role supporting the American policies or the European policies, and sometimes torn apart between Chinese and Russian interests and the West. This is where we need something. We were all celebrating the Arab Spring. I was very cautious with this. I said, be careful, because there are not political reasons behind. There are much more economic reasons and geostrategic realities there. So I think that on this, we need to be clear on what we want for the Muslim majority countries or for the Middle East, because now it's true. It's the Balkanization of the region. This is where we need to be quite clear. On our side, it's important in the United States, in the West, to have voices coming together. And once again, it's not a Muslim business. It's our business as citizens to come together and to be critical towards our own governments, because we cannot just sit down and cry when people are killed, not understanding that the policies behind and all what we have seen, which is not new, it's still now counting the dead people while others are making money out of it, because the destabilized Middle East, in the name of security, it helps the people to sell weapons. It's not new. To get their interest in oil or in uranium or in lithium, as it were, in Afghanistan. So this is where we citizens, we have to wake up. We have to wake up. And if you see what is happening in my country here in the UK, with all the discussion that you had about Corbyn and the people who are playing, it's called connected, because these are people who did what they did during the war, supporting the war, and now they are coming trying to talk about, democratization and human dignity. That's not acceptable for us. So this is what we need to do on both sides, so to speak.
Before we wrap, I just wanted to ask you one final question with the release of the Chilcot report. In 2004, Professor Ramadan, you'd accepted a job at University of Notre Dame in Indiana. Time magazine listed you among the 10 top 100 thinkers in the world. But 9 days before Ramadan was set to start teaching here in the United States, before you were set to start teaching, the Bush administration revoked your visa, invoking a provision of the Patriot Act that allows the government to deny entry to non-citizens who, quote, endorse or espouse terrorism. So you weren't allowed in during the Bush years. During the Obama years, they let you in. In light of the Chilcot report, what do you say about what happened to you then?
What I said to the Homeland Security when they came all the way to see me in Switzerland, and all their questions were about two things. When I was saying the Iraqi resistance is right because your presence in Iraq is wrong, and I was adding to this because in all our discussion, it's as if we are forgetting the Palestinian resistance. I said the Palestinian resistance is right. We may disagree on the means, but we have to come to an understanding that there will be no peace in the region if you don't change your policy. Years after this, even though I can enter into the country, the problem is that we were hopeful with Obama. The policies have not changed. It's exactly the same. And while we were celebrating Clinton before Bush, Clinton was, in fact, the one who was in charge with the sanction, which, as it was said, killed 500,000 people. At that point, what I said at that time, which prevented me, and I was banned from the country, to say in a clear way that the American policy is one of the main reasons why we have all these people being killed and the spread of terrorism all in the region and in Afghanistan to African countries now. We have to take responsibility. So I was banned from entering. Now I can enter. It doesn't mean that things are changing. It's the same dirty politics with very nice words that we had with President Obama, unfortunately. And if you look at what is coming now with Trump and Hillary Clinton, not good news for the States.
Tariq Ramadan, I want to thank you for being with us, Professor of Contemporary Islamic Studies at Oxford University, author of a number of influential books on Islam in the West, including Western Muslims and the Future of Islam, as well as In the Footsteps of the Prophet, Lessons from the Life of Muhammad. Ramadan was named by Time magazine as one of the most important innovators of the 21st century. And thanks to Tariq Ali, political commentator, historian, editor of New Left Review, and Sami Ramadani.